The morning it all began, the mist still hung low over the valley, wrapping the lake like a secret. I stood on the edge of my dam, the air heavy with silence and anger. Below me, 35 houses shimmered under the rising sun, homes that weren't supposed to be there. Homes built on my land. They said progress was inevitable. They said the homeowners association had approval, but they never asked me. My name is Ethan Cole, and for 3 generations, this land had belonged to my family. My grandfather carved the dam with his bare hands during the Great Depression. It wasn't much back then, just a creek and a dream, but over time, it became Lake Cole, a quiet refuge where my family built memories, fishing at dawn, campfires by the water, laughter echoing across the ripples. That was, until the HOA of Clearwater Meadows decided they wanted a lakeside community. It started small, surveyors marking boundaries, temporary construction offices on the edge of my property. I was told it was a misunderstanding. They said their maps were approved by the county. Then came the bulldozers, the trees fell, the soil was stripped, and in less than a year, 35 luxury homes stood proudly along the waterline, half of them sitting on land deeded to me. When I confronted the HOA president, Charles Whitmore, he gave me a smirk that still burns in my memory. "Mr. Cole," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "we've already invested millions. If there was an issue, it should have been handled before we broke ground. It's too late now." Too late. I spent the next year fighting lawyers, counter records, endless meetings. But money talks louder than truth. The HOA had connections, and I was just a man with memories. Each time I drove past those homes, I felt another piece of my family's legacy stolen. Then one morning, while I was checking the dam's old floodgates, the same gates my grandfather had built in 1942, I saw something strange. A new storm drainage system, connected to their development, channeling runoff straight into the lake. They hadn't just built on my land, they tied their entire drainage system into my dam without permission. And that was the moment I stopped feeling powerless. I didn't plan revenge immediately. I tried one last time to reason with them. I met Charles in his fancy office, overlooking the homes. "I'm asking for what's fair," I said. "Pay for the land you built on, acknowledge what you did." He laughed. "Mr. Cole, you don't understand how business works. The land is already developed. You can't undo progress." He was wrong. For the next few weeks, I studied the dam's flow systems, the gates, the release valves, the emergency spillway. I knew every bolt, every lever. The lake had risen unusually high after weeks of rain. The HOA ignored my warnings about the drainage issue. They were too busy selling their last few lakefront properties. On a cold morning in March, the pressure built too high. I called the county water board, the HOA, even Charles himself. Nobody answered. They thought I was bluffing. So I stood on that dam again, looking at the homes below, manicured lawns, white fences, kids riding bikes. Part of me hesitated. These weren't just structures, they were people's lives now. But then I remembered my father's words the day before he passed. "Never let them take what's ours, Ethan. This land has a voice. When they don't listen, make them hear it." I opened the first valve. The metal groaned like it hadn't in decades. Water thundered through, surging toward the spillway. Then I opened the second. Within minutes, the lake's calm surface turned into a raging current. The drainage ditches from the whole project overflowed first, then their manicured lawns turned into muddy rivers. Panic spread fast. Sirens, shouts, flashing lights. Charles arrived, drenched, yelling something about lawsuits and destruction. I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching the water reclaim what it always owned. By nightfall, the flow was under control, enough to drain the excess and protect the dam's structure. I didn't destroy the homes completely, I wasn't a monster. But the lower half of their development was ruined. Foundations cracked, streets were washed out. The county launched an investigation. And that's when everything changed. Turns out, the HOA's permits were falsified. They'd bribed an official to alter the property lines. My land, the one they'd built on, was still legally mine. Their drainage work, illegal. Their development plan, invalid. The county ordered a full audit. Charles lost his position, the HOA dissolved, and the homeowners sued the developer, not me. The company went bankrupt within months. When the dust settled, I walked back to the lake. The air smelled of rain and renewal. The water had found its balance again. I didn't rebuild fences or post no trespassing signs. Instead, I turned that land into Coal Reserve Park, a public space dedicated to my grandfather Ray, open to anyone who wanted peace by the water. I wanted people to see that land can heal, and so can people, if they remember what truly matters. One afternoon, a young boy asked me if I'd always lived there. I smiled. "Not always," I said, looking out over the calm lake. "But it's always been home." Because sometimes justice doesn't come from courts or lawyers, it comes from standing your ground, even when the current tries to wash you away. And when I opened that dam, I didn't just release water, I released generations of silence. Moral: you can't steal roots from the soil that remembers its name. The land always knows who it belongs to.